or afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. It's 11 o'clock here on the West Coast, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to the Best of the Best webinar series brought to you by Novedge, Design Software Superstore. My name is Vince, and I'm the newest member here at Novedge. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're very excited not only to present Luxology's Moto 501, but also have Dan Ablan giving us an insightful overview of the improved user face and workflow, as well as some features and functions of the updates. Just a little background on Dan. He's an author, trainer, 3D animator, and photographer working out of his Chicago studio. He's been in the media arts for nearly 20 years and has authored 14 books on computer graphics, animation, and photography. With a large collection of training videos for 3D Garage, Dan has also recently completed work for lynda.com. Some of his animation clients include NASA, United Airlines, and Johnson & Johnson, just to name a few. So we're truly privileged to have Dan on board with this. Dan's going to speak for about the next 40 minutes or so, and then after that we'll open up to a Q&A session for everyone. During that time, you'll be on listen mode only. Feel free to answer or put in any questions you have into the question box, and at the end, during the Q&A, we'll get to as many as we can. So, having said that, I think we'll turn it over to Dan. Dan, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll just switch to screen.
Okay. All right, let me show my screen.
And you should be good to go.
Okay, now do you see just the Moto screen or do you see my entire desktop?
Entire desktop.
So I can go like this.
Yep, that works.
Okay, good, good. How's everybody doing? I think we have, what's that, looks like 77 people?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually really good.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, we'll go as long as we can because it's odd not hearing everybody. Usually we get a few questions first, but there are a ton of improvements in Moto 501. I got to say that initially when I first started seeing some of it, and I know I was talking to some of the other beta testers, we're all kind of at first I don't want to say disappointed, but had a little less enthusiasm because with every release, and I think Brad Fiedler talked about this, there's always like a big bang, big wow, something brand new and cool. And there are a lot of things like that in here, but nothing that, like other packages have had over the years. But then once you start kind of getting into really what's been done, it is an amazing upgrade with all the improvements. And I can't cover all of them today, and I'm going to do my best for some of the big ones, and then we can open up to questions and really get into it a bit. But what Brad had said too was that often developers put in all the new features and all the big new stuff and kind of leave behind the other things that need to be worked on. So that's kind of the approach they took with 501. I think it was a really smart way to go. So let me just do a few things here. I don't have a ton of stuff, but I want to use, one thing with all the training materials, I always like to show what comes with the system. You notice I don't have any plugins or additions on, just so that whatever I do is also something you guys can do as well. So in the layout tab here, I'll just jump down to meshes, and a number of different existing meshes come with the system. And I just want to pull up just a few just as examples, so whatever objects I have, you guys, if you have a screen going, you can do it too. And not really doing tutorials, just going to jump through a few different things. But, if I just double-click and load this apple, and I'm going to press the O key and just turn off my locators, just so you can see this. One of the things, I'll just start with some of the basics first, that I really like is the RayGL. Now, depending on your video card, this is going to vary. And again, with the webinar, I'm not quite sure how well this translates over the web. So we've got cable internet here at the studio, so it should be coming out pretty well. But with this RayGL, it actually just gives us instant feedback right inside the layout, which is really terrific. I'm going to load up a scene, and if I can get to it without too much trouble, I'm going to come. This is actually from our Moto 501 signature course. This is a project in our course that you build entirely from the ground up, and I got an old image in there. And what this is It's this little warehouse using a number of different textures. And you can see this drawing, hopefully you can see it drawing pretty well directly in layout. Now let's press the A key and just drop it all back. And you can see that's the entire scene. Let's just come down in here real quick. And I'm just using the scroll wheel on my mouse just to let you see. And the reason I'm calling up this scene is because it's got a lot of elements in here that I think are pretty important for using the Ray GL. And you can see it slowing down a little bit, but it's working okay. And what this is, has volumetric lights, has a lot of textures, image maps, has light coming through the windows, has global illumination, has procedural texture for the floor, and you can see that in just a matter of minutes, or excuse me, a matter of seconds, the whole screen draws pretty well. You can change this depending on your video card, but on the walls here you can see there's bump maps and displacement maps, textures on the floor. Everything in here, I believe, the way we did this, I'm trying to remember, is all procedural. This is just a very simple, this cauldron right here is a very simple little tub, just with bumps and displacements and everything else on there. Volumetrics are all showing in real time. You had in the render tab before just this quick little render in here, this preview. And basically what that OpenGL, that Ray GL will do is kind of just give you that directly in your layout. So depending on your scene, you can change that. Sometimes turning off overlays and wireframes will help speed that up as well. But just to give you just a good idea what this preview does. Now, another thing with this preview that's been done is that you can render, and I'm just going to move my scene so it redraws a bit. It will render under the mouse. So if I move my mouse, it's going to start refining under here first, which is really nice. So if you've got just an area you want to see quickly, you can just see that render. But if you go up to the preferences, down under preview, you can now set the anti-aliasing samples. So again, if your system's a little bit older, my system here, I'm working on a Mac Pro. I want to say it's about almost 2 years old, not quite. It's a dual quad, and I got 14 gigs of memory in here. So it renders pretty well. The video card, if you go on the Mac, on the Apple site, it's one up from the standard. So it's not a super video card in here at all. But it works really well with Moto. And if you've got something less, an older system, you can change the anti-aliasing, the radiance cache, and all of the little values here for that preview. So it's not refining as far, and you're not waiting as long. But you can see here that the refinement on this render looks really good. And what I like to do is go Command-Shift-4 on my Mac, and if you got a PC, I think you use just a print screen, and I literally can just go like this, and I've got a client preview, just a nice, right on my desktop. You know, I didn't have to wait for the whole render, so really great for clients just using that preview. But okay, so let's clear that out. Let me show you one thing real quick too. This is in this right here, this guy. What you're seeing here, this is two scenes put together, and it's something from our 501 course using the inverse kinematics in Moto, which came out in 401, but it's also been refined in 501. And what you can see here, if you go under the channels, get to the right selection here, there's a claw, and if you press C, you can actually see that by moving this little heads-up display here, this channel hall, that claw actually controls the two of those. And that's an assembly that was set up right in 501, and that's something new which we'll come back to. So let me just close all of that. Okay, so I've got a big list here of all kinds of things I want to talk about. One of the other things would probably be the Pixar Subdivisions. Really kind of an important thing. And what it allows you to do, it gives you more complex with less geometry, and you'll have less distortion of your images. What I like to show is how the edges can kind of come together. So I'm just going to do a really simple thing here. Just shift-click a cylinder and then shift-click a cube. And actually, let's take that cube and put it in the same layer. And I'll move it over. And then we'll take our cylinder here and we'll move this over. And every once in a while, you're going to have shapes that come together that really shouldn't. You'll have lines that converge, just like on the side of a car, that go from more of a hard edge to a smooth edge. And that's what the Pixar Subdivisions will help you do. So I'm just going to select these two polygons, and under Polygon, go to Bridge. I'll click to add a few segments, and let's just jump up the twist a bit and kind of get a nice little shape like that. And I'm just going to bevel down this guy right here a little bit. Okay, so if I hit the Tab key, you would expect what you see. You get these weird pinching right here. And if I come down here to reflection mode and come in a little bit, you can see, get this really weird pinching. Okay, well, the first thing you might think to do is come down to your subdivision level and maybe increase that. Okay, well, that helps a little bit, especially over here on those edges, but not here. So I'll hit the Tab key, turn that off, and if I go to Shift Tab, you can see how much smoother that is. And Shift Tab puts on the Pixar Subdivisions, different algorithm. Okay, and there are some settings for it down here under the properties. Okay, so I've got the object selected in the item list, and under the properties, under boundary rules, you say crease all or smooth all. And this is going to vary depending on if you're using edge weighting or what kind of object you have. But just on a very simple, quick level, you can see that I can take really different shapes, put them together, and have those edges come together pretty nicely. I can clean that up by simply selecting an edge here and hitting my backspace key and removing, and that even helps it a little bit more. So Shift Tab versus the Tab key, your typical subdivision, and reflection mode is really good for this because you can see how the smooth values work across that surface. Tab key, turn it off, and Shift Tab to turn that on. Now Shift Tab is really important, that Pixar Subdivision, when you're getting into the multi-res sculpting. So if I go over to the Paint tab and we take a look at our object and go under the Sculpt Tools, and we can just do something like Carve, notice that the tip also gets automatically selected. That's something new for 501 because it is all about workflow. So the right mouse, I can increase that, and if you take a look down here under your Sculpt Tools, got a number of different little presets now, which is always really handy. It's great for creating rocks and grounds and bricks and all kinds of things. So I'll select one of these, right-click to size it, and if I just kind of brush on here, you can see that, well, I should put multi-res on, because what happens is I've only got one big fat polygon, a couple of fat polygons here. So with the multi-res, it will actually, this is not the best object to do this on, it'll subdivide in a multi-resolution for each one of those polygons. So let's create a new object entirely, just a very simple ball. And then we're going to hit Shift Tab. And actually, you don't even have to, because if you put on multi-res, it will tell you you need multi-res on when you need Pixar Subdivisions, so also called Catmull-Clark Subdivisions. Okay, so we'll come back in here again to Sculpt Tools, choose Carve, choose one of these brushes, and actually I want to make it nice and small. And then you can see right in here, it's starting to happen a little bit, but if I increase my max level, and be careful of this, not to go too far, now I actually can create a much tighter resolution all within that area. This is really terrific for putting scars on faces, bags under eyes, things like that. Little fine details without actually having a ton of geometry. Because in the past, you would actually have to subdivide this whole area or use something like a displace map or a bump map. But right now, I can actually sculpt with just very simple geometry. So really pretty nice to have that feature in there. Now, I don't get to do a lot of this with my type of work, unfortunately. But if I have to, I can. One way I have done this is this huge project for the American Dental Association last year, and had to do a lot of teeth and gums and plaque and gingivitis. So I was able to actually sculpt right on the teeth, which works out pretty well. So that multi-res sculpting is very, very nice. All right, let's close all these out. I feel like saying, is there any questions? But you're not on. There's 81 of you now. We're getting up there. All right, let's talk about a couple of new modeling tools. And what I want to do is come down and let's get ourselves a new mesh. Take the little guy. I'm going to turn the Ray GL off just so things draw a little bit faster for you guys. Okay, so here you've got a head, and I might want a little more detail in here. Maybe I'm going to turn him into an alien or something. And typically what I would do, select a couple of these, and I would do an Alt-C, which is a loose slice like that. Well, I don't really want to add just like that. And part of the problem, too, is that it's flat right here when I add that slice. And typically what I would do then, which isn't a big deal, is I can just actually go to edge mode, move that edge out. But that's been enhanced as well. It's all these little things that have really been perfected, which is very, very nice. So what I'll do is then come in here. Let me go back to my tools, go back to model, and let's put this back onto Advanced OpenGL. So if we come down to edge, there's an add loop tool. And one of the things that will help in there is preserve curvature. Okay, so let's do one at a time. So we'll do an Alt-C, which is loop slice, and we'll turn on preserve curvature, okay? So we'll do the same thing we just did. Take a couple of these, Alt-C, and hit preserve curvature. And now that edge added preserves that curvature of the head. And of course, this isn't just for heads. It could be for anything you want, any kind of object that you might need. The add loop, however, just saves you a step because you can also keep preserve curvature on, but simply just come to an edge and click. And so very easily can just select like that, hold the shift key to add, and just start adding more detail around. Really, really helps refine your time. And it might seem like a simple step, but if you're like me and you kind of model simple and then add more detail, it works really well, just adding those. By the same token, you can add a point. And that's going to help when you've got, you know, more curvature type things like tubes. I think Andy Brown had done one where he's got a tube built around a curve, and he needed to bend it a little bit. And you can simply just add a point right in the middle, pull that point, and change the shape. So works pretty well. All right, what else can we do? We have Pixar Subdivisions. We talked about preview. There's new fog tools, multi-res sculpting. And let's talk about the render. Obviously, one of the big, huge things. The render engine, and let me load up a better scene for you. The render engine is faster. Updates have been made to ray tracing. It uses a wider gamut of the processor in your computer, so even if you have a lesser processor, Moto is going to take better advantage of it. Great bit of noise reduction, because I know it's been one thing I've seen on the forums that a lot of people are always looking at, is that there's sometimes some noise in the images. And you have to really up the render and up some of the refinement. And you don't have to do it as much because the noise is better. And because it's rendering faster, you can still up it and get an even cleaner render. There's better depth of field. And one thing that I know Mac users are happy about, that it is a Cocoa version 64-bit. So 64-bit both Mac and PC, which is very, very nice. And so you can do things like 64 or 256 samples for your area lights or blur reflections and still get decent render times. I'm not going to let you worry about sitting through a render. If I press F9, this is only a 720 by 400. But if you look here, I've got my anti-aliasing samples up to 64. And you can see that we've got 2.02 million polygons. And maybe I will let you see this render, because it does render pretty fast. And again, what happens, this machine, this is dual quad, so I'm allowing all the processors to be used. And with volumetric lighting, I don't know how much you've done with volumetric lighting, but it does really slow you down. At least it has for me in the past. My other system is a G5, and unfortunately I can't upgrade that to the latest Mac operating system. So we had to add the Mac Pro. But you can see, you know, with not much time, this is rendering pretty well. One entire scene with a bunch of volumetric lighting. And you can see already that the noise is not looking that bad at all in there. I don't know how well that comes over, but oh, we have 82 people now. Pretty good. All right, so again, I didn't want you to wait for all of this to render, but you can see it still renders really fast because this entire scene is procedural, of course, except for the simple geometry. And procedural textures are based on your system memory as well. Image maps are going to render a little faster, and that's kind of part of the deal with this, is that it's all done with existing textures that are built into Moto. And while I'm at it, let me show you a couple of those. And let's just close all this. All right, so let's jump over to the render real quick and take a look at some of the materials in the shader tree. There are a number of new materials and a new organization all within here. And first one you're going to see is the enhanced Moto textures. There is a number of things in here you can use for all kinds of surfaces, and I'm just going to cover just a few of them. The ones I really like, and the ones that were covered in that warehouse scene, are a lot of these noise and organic ones. So just simply put, you can choose this Art Deco. Puts that nice procedural on there. And the procedural are just computer-generated textures. And what's great about these is that they're easy to repeat and use throughout the scene, used for all kinds of things. Here, this one, just put down as a diffuse color with the Art Deco. Let me just delete one of them, keep it simple. I can change this or even make a instance of it and then change that to a bump map. And you can see that now we've got that texture on there with a bump. Which gets me into my next thing, is the enhanced bump maps, which is something I think has just been really helpful. I do a lot of bump maps for medical animation, and sometimes you might have noticed, I've seen people on forums talk about it, you can't get your bump maps to show enough. You know, here I can see it a little bit. Not quite the best image for it, but the thing is, if I want to see it more, let's come down to the material. Rather than based on percentage, this bump amplitude, the amount of the bump, is actually based on distance. So if 5 millimeters, let's set right now, I'll go to 30 millimeters. And now you can truly see how that bump is changing that surface. Okay, let's try another one. I'm going to right click and delete these. Let's go into Enhance Moto, come down to Skins, and let's go to Grainy Wood. Okay. And then we're going to right click, and instead of adding another one, we're just going to change this one straight out to a bump map. And then I'll change my bump material. Let's bring that up to 90. So without much work, you can see that the bumps really do start applying pretty well. More intense objects. Let's see what we got here in organic, and go to rocks. No, let's do something. Let's do a vehicle instead. I thought the rocks would work for us. Okay, so here's just one of these spacecraft parts that are included. Okay, I think Brad had used that other one. And one of the ones I found really nice is the Occlusion Shaders. So let's just come back over to our shader tree. Open up the Space Gun material, default, and material. And in these processors, you can see that there's one called Occlusion. Okay, and let's turn on, let's jump to my render. Go a little bit better for us. Okay, and what's nice about this is that I can actually create an occlusion-based shader, and we can just change it to convexity and concavity so that you can actually create dirt and noise inside these little creases and edges. And this is going to apply differently depending on your object and depending on how it's modeled. Certainly you have control over both of these things in here. And this is not rendering with edges, which is possible now with 501. I'll show you that next. But this is just a way you can actually create just kind of grunge and dirt hanging, dripping from different areas. So let's increase the distance here, get an idea what that looks like. Okay, and you can take this a lot farther by baking and using UV maps, and don't have enough time to do that. I'm looking at the clock, but Brad's got a tutorial up on the forum, not even a tutorial, just a demo video. I'll show you how to actually render this and bake it in. You can just right click and say bake to file, and then jump over to the paint tab and paint right through it. But this is a really great way to work, especially when you want to just create some dirty edges. And one of the tutorials in our 501 course, we just make some keys, and one of them's clean and pretty, and the other one is just all kind of dirty and grungy like it's been used, which is pretty nice. But along these lines, as I was talking about rendering with edges, I know that's something people have wanted to do for a really long time. I've done a good bit of architectural animations, and that's always something the illustrators want. You know, I like really using the camera in 3D. As a photographer, I like really getting in there and moving things around like that. But often they want things very kind of just flat and not too much perspective, and often want to see the edges. So if you jump into the shader tree and go to the final color output, down at the bottom now in 501 you're going to find this thing called contours. And you could say surface boundaries, and what's going to happen, let me just press the F9 key, close that out. You can put the surface boundaries on. Let's increase these pixels a little bit. And render these, see the black lines out there? And let me put it on for segment boundaries. And now you've got essentially a wireframe render tracing around this. All right, so depending on how you model a building, piece of machinery, you can actually do something relatively creative using these. It's not a whole lot really to set other than just doing that. I've seen people use it pretty large for characters. Jump that up to about 6 pixels. Get a very nice edge on there. You know, if you want to even make a clip map or clip art, it's a great way to render something out like that, save it out with an alpha channel, and then just drop it in Photoshop, and you've got this sort of nice anime look. So it works pretty well. Okay. RayGL, let's talk about image ink just a little bit. Say close all. Actually, I don't. Let's just paint right on this guy. So when I go down to paint in the paint tab, okay, go to paint tools. Let's just choose a paintbrush, and under image ink now, if you look down here under image ink, there's a number of different presets that have come with as well. And I love my presets, so that's always good. You can choose one of these, and very simply just click right in there, choose a size, just move it off, get out of the way. And now make sure, I'm notorious for leaving that off and I can't see what I'm doing. And actually, this is one that's great for RayGL. Let's try an entire, I think, let's try a new object, make sure I'm on the right surface here. Aha. Let me reset this real quick. Show you how this painting works. All right. Okay, so we've got our image ink, and I'm having a little problem here with this one. All right, so let's skip this. I'll come back to this when we start asking questions, because I was going to show you how the multi-res works on the sculpting as well with the paint tools, but that is not working for me right now, which happens. Okay, well, why don't we open up some questions? I've got more on my list here. So, Vince, you want to go and do that because I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah, it looks, as of right now, there aren't any questions. So you could just keep going down your list if you wanted to.
All right. And I don't know if they don't even have to type any in if they want to just, I don't know if you can turn everybody's, anybody has microphones or not. But it doesn't look like we have a ton, so if people want to just even talk, that's fine too.
Yeah, let me see. Actually, here, we got a couple questions coming in. Tom wants to know, can you talk a bit about the snapping enhancements?
Yeah. I can do that. And actually, there's even some background constraint stuff too I want to show you. So let's get a mesh going here. Let's jump over to layout, and let's do an animal. Mr. Hippo. Okay, so number of things, and this is related to snapping. I'm going to press the O command, and let's get our visibility set the same so you can see it. If I've got my patch tool here, and I want to make quads, down under snapping, if I open this up, this has been enhanced quite a bit. So we've got a very nice snapping panel, because there used to be, there's snapping on right up here, but there also used to be some background constraints there. But everything can be controlled right here now. And I'm just going to turn on background, and we want this to be just like that. And geometry is going to be set to vector, geometry constraint. And so what I can do then is just start building some polygons over this. And you know, it might actually be better. I know I put that on, but I think I'm going to go back to wireframe. Okay, so I'll hit the tab key, and you can see that that follows that contour. Well, what's nice in this new version of Moto is that I can take things like this edge, and if I hit the Z key to extend it, this geometry constraint can also be used for edge extends. So just as I right-click, as I shift-click and just extend this edge, you can see that it follows the contour, the geometry behind it. So really well improved. Now, a lot of people that I've talked to and have trained, they don't quite understand what this retopology is all about. And if you're working with a lot of different models from different people, I actually had one from Hallmark, and it was scanned in with a big 3D scanner. So it was all triangulated. You couldn't use it. It was impossible. I did a job 12 years ago for United Airlines and NASA for the Sophia project, and the plane they had literally would not load in our systems. I mean, if we got it loaded, we couldn't even move it around and texture map it. It was just too big. So we actually had to rebuild it with 2 layers. Well, this is what the retopology is for. It gets you to build a quad mesh over an object very easily. Other ideas with the snapping are really good for geometry when you've got architectural and more mechanical things. Very easily you can turn on snapping for world space and grid space, and for the work plane. So I don't have a full architecture, any kind of buildings here to show you, but when you have buildings that you need to constrain to a specific point, you can use all the snapping modes right in here. You can also, and along those lines, let me do this because I've got, let's say you're building something like, not you're going to be building a toilet, but let's say you got something like that. A way you can actually change points, and this is related to snapping but not specifically. Let's say I had this geometry right here. Just take that polygon, and I'm going to align the work plane to selection. Okay. Then what I could do is come around to these verts, and let's say I want to take this row here, so I'll press the L key for loop. I can come over here to Vertex and choose Set Position. Now, Set Position in the past did not work on the work plane. It was only for world space. Now there's an option in here for work plane, and I can stay on the Y, and what it'll do is actually move that position to that set work plane, which is pretty nice. By the same token, you can use Align in that same respect. And you can choose any particular axis, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, X, Y, Z, and so on. So just nice ways to really refine and control position of points and movement. So what other questions?
Okay, Gavin wants to know, how can you apply an ambient occlusion pass to the entire scene? Is there an easy way to do this?
To the entire scene. Let's load up a scene. We'll pretend this is it. I believe, because you can add occlusion shaders now. Okay, and let me check to see if these will do it. I believe right here, just like that. Okay, so you would do another output, and I've not done one. So what you want to do is you want to add another render output like that. So you've got your final color and your alpha, which are your defaults, and then add another one as ambient occlusion. And then when you do your render, you can just choose it right from there. Pretty simple. And just save that out. And you don't even, if you don't need a final color, you could just remove that as well. Let me load up a very simple scene. All right, so here's this key project scene. Just a pair of keys on the ground. And if I come over to the render, and we'll add a new render output. Change that to ambient. And give this a second to render. Yeah, it takes a little bit at first and then it goes. You know, and I'm looking at the lights here too. That's another thing. That's there's so many different new features in here. You also have inverse square control on your lights now. And for those of you that aren't quite familiar with that, the inverse square law says an object that is twice the distance from a light source will receive 1/4 of the illumination. So your light doesn't have to have it, but you can turn that on if you want. So basically, if you take your light and you move it 3 meters, from 3 meters, let's say to 6 meters, you're going to need 4 times the amount of light. Just a nice setting you can put on. All right, so here's your final color. There's your alpha, and because we have a background, you can't see it, but there's your occlusion. Okay?
Okay.
So just render, and there's quite a few others in there too you can experiment with. Just right-click on there. You just look at luminous shading, motion vector, all kinds of things. Great for compositing later. What else we got?
Okay, Michael asked, he said, I noticed you had the new pack add-on installed. He just wanted to know how you liked it compared to more traditional product modeling workflow.
That's this one down here. Which one? The where are my meshes? Are there? Yeah, this one, this pack content. I haven't used it much. Actually, just put it in this week. But so far, it's been pretty good. This is actually an add-on you can get. The information is up on the Luxology site. Process of these add-ons, the way they've been coming out. You know, there's the light kit you can get, which is really tremendous, and now these modeling kits, and it's just a really neat way to work that you can just start adding pieces. Now, I do a lot of product shots, so most of them are these really unique designs, and the advantage of doing product shots in 3D is that you can work with the designer's files and bring that to life for their client. So in this sense, these things don't help me entirely because I'm doing completely unique designs that aren't actually manufactured yet. However, if you're doing things that are storefront and you're just doing add-ons for packages and you don't really want to take the time to model something, or you have a product shelf you're passing by in your scene, or a desktop and you need things in there, it's really terrific for that. Anytime I can get away from modeling something and I can just load up an object and modify it in some way, I'm all over it. Time is money, you know, so you don't want to have to be modeling everything. And there's even some wrappers in here too, so. Yeah.
Okay. Lars was wondering, he models architecture in ArchiCAD and Rhino. He was just curious how the integration with these programs is, as well as any changes made in the 3D geometry.
You know, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on back and forth with Rhino. I don't use Rhino. But I do bring objects in and out of Moto quite often to fix them. There's certain times I'm using Lightwave because of certain animation controls, you know, like bones, more complex objects like that, different types of things that have to be done, particles. Matter of fact, I'm just going to load one up here. There is a project I'm working on, which I just got an email that I need to make changes, of course. This is actually all for United, and these are going to be on the kiosks when you go to the airport. And I'll load up one of these planes here. What I like about the way Moto interacts is that I can actually load objects from Lightwave. I've done it from Cinema 4D. I've done a lot of files from Google and SketchUp. They've all loaded just fine, and even on the output, the image maps retain. So I would imagine it would be the same on Rhino. Let me pull up these images here for you. And let me just say no to the rest of these. So when I load these up, you can see how they're clean, but they're not the greatest models at all. I actually bring a lot of models into Moto to clean them up. There was one model we had, and it wasn't this one, that had some weird polygons inside, and I couldn't clean it up in anything else. So brought it into Moto, and very easily I can come in and I can take edges like this. You can also use the Select Diagonals edge that's new in Moto, and just hit your backspace to get rid of these. You can't quite do that in most other programs and keep a clean structure. But as you know, something that's more quad-based is going to render a lot cleaner than it is if it's triangular. So yeah, so I've had great luck with objects that are coming in and out of Moto and keeping the texture, so I would imagine it would work the same with Rhino. It didn't just matter trying it.
Okay, that's great. Chris from Australia was wondering. He wants to know if you can split a single vertex, which has, say, 3 leading into it from either side from a bevel. He knows about the Vertex Split key, but for some reason it doesn't work for him.
You know, that's what that would be my first one to say, split. You know, I don't think there's actually anything more if there's an unweld. I've actually had to do that in Lightwave a couple of times to unweld any selected points. So if split doesn't work, and it's only points, you know, maybe try working with the polygons or the edges and see if you could pull them apart that way. Sometimes when I can't control something with an edge, I'll use a vertex, or if I can't control the vertex, I'll jump to the edge and pull it that way, and that might seem to work.
Okay. Pascal was wondering if you could talk about the new animation workflow.
Animation workflow. I can. Jumping over to the Animate tab, the animation hasn't changed too much since 401, and I don't do a lot of animation in here just because of time. I do most of my modeling and rendering, but the animation workflow is pretty easy once you get the hang of it. You know, it's really just a matter of, just like any animation program, being at one point in time, here's your timeline down at the bottom, creating a key for it. And in Moto, anywhere you see these little dots, those can be keyframed. For instance, and taking a little side note here, there's something that's kind of nice when you're working with certain textures and layers. If you've got a material on and you want to change that value, there's a dissolve now right here for that material, which allows you to pull down all the reflections and shaders and everything else all at the same time. And of course, you can keyframe that by clicking the little dot right there. So yeah, anywhere you see those dots. But I'm in the bad habit of doing Shift Y for these. And make sure you're in item mode, because that can happen a lot to me. I end up being in a polygon mode or a vertex mode, and really when you animate something you want to be in item mode. Okay, see what I did there? Okay, that happens because I had moved the object in polygon mode and I left the center for it back where its origin was. So we'll pull that back over. And then we'll jump to item mode because we want to move the whole thing. So that is one of the things you really need to watch out for when you're setting up the animation. It can really screw you up. So we got our Y, and then I just like to press Shift Y, and that creates a keyframe. Go back here for my properties for all of the keys. And then I can go to the next point in time, and it automatically creates a keyframe for me because my auto key is set to animated. So anything I do will be keyframed. And we'll jump back down over here and move that down. So pretty simple. And that's pretty much the workflow. I like that I can open this up and get to my other channels if I need, and I can move different values. If I had rotations on, I can actually shift and adjust those. You can just even use it like that, and then click and drag any other additional keyframes. So the workflow for it's pretty simple. Just really got to take your time and take a few steps through it.
Okay. Carl was wondering if you could recommend an external ray tracer, or is the built-in one complete enough to suit most needs?
You know what? For me, it's been fine. I know a lot of people right away when they get a 3D program, they want to look for external and third-party renderers, but I've really had no problem with the rendering on here. You just got to remember that when you're rendering, to set the values right. Set some of these up here. So if you go under settings, get that anti-aliasing up, and now it goes even higher in Moto 5. Take the refinement down, set it to like 0.1, and work with, your reflection depth and some of the other values. And, if you've got displacement maps, check those displacement rates. But just get that shading rate down, and then just using 501's new features, it's rendering better just out of the gate before you even set any of these. And look at the website. There's tons of beautiful renders straight out of Moto. So yeah, I've just kept everything inside here. If you're experimenting and just kind of playing around, and try it out, see which render works better for you. But in a production environment, when there's clients waiting and time is money, it's like I just got to hit render and let that go. I don't have time to screw around. So
Okay. Quentin was wondering, for rendering large, complex illustration files, is it simpler to try setting up your own net render on 2 or 3 machines, or is it recommended to hire it out instead?
That really depends on your budget and your time. I've always just rendered in-house. I think we had one time we had to render out. We've got a few machines in here, and some of the medical animations I was doing this summer for Johnson & Johnson, I had to render on my other machines. And that's really pretty simple to do. You just set up Moto on your other machine, put your license in, and make sure your main machine is running. So like this, in this case, this is my main machine. This is running. When the other Moto license comes on, make sure it's on the internet, make sure it's on your network. It will see that this license is running and say, okay, something else is running. Do you want to render in slave mode? And you say yes. And then up in your preferences, you just give it a directory, and it will start shooting renders over. When you render right now, we got these yellow buckets like that. When you have the slave mode on, it will actually be showing you, I think it's blue or green, showing you the other processors on the other networks are rendering. And it works pretty well. For me, I've just kind of let one render go, because in the past, whenever I've done network rendering with anything, I actually found that I was spending more time managing that render than I was just letting the system render. I think we had a TV show in '99, this big, huge, terrible Sleepy Hollow show, and we had a huge render farm. And it was okay, but for me, I generally like to render on 2 machines. So if I have another machine here with my license on it, I might just take it off the network and just load the scene there and let that one render as well as the other one. So yeah, just try it out.
Okay, and then here we go, just a couple more. Adam was wondering, based on the new features of Moto 501, do you think that you'll be using it more as your primary package, and/or use it more instead of other apps?
Depends on the project, I have to say. For the medical work, I actually love it. In fact, I kind of get excited when somebody wants some realistic renders. I kind of get excited knowing what we could do in Moto to give them a look. When it's product stuff, product, medical, that's all 100% Moto. My main 2 really are Moto and Lightwave. And even though there's Cinema 4D, if there's more motion graphics for some of their controls, these are the main 2 programs. And just love it when it's product stuff and architecture and medical, because it's just great for that. But more complex animations, I got to say I'm using Lightwave, because you know, it's 20 years of using it as well. That's also part of it. But I can just get in and get my stuff done, let it render, and get out. So I don't feel that one program will be your everything, depending if you're doing different types of work. If you're strictly architecture, you can have a workflow of AutoCAD to Moto and render. Strictly medical, you can use Moto 100%. But if you do need more things like particles and special effects, you are going to need some other programs. So yeah, it just depends on the job.
Okay. And then Jorge was wondering, would it be possible to explain the concept of new node-based interface?
Well, you mean in terms of the this guy down here, the assemblies? Because
yeah, I believe so.
one of the things
Yeah.
that I know has been talked about is, for instance, people wanted a node-based shader, and a node being like a network or like a little flow chart. If anybody's ever used Digital Fusion, you set up your compositing all through little nodes like that, little icons. Well, you don't have that for the shader, and I'm actually fine with it. Some other people like that for materials. I'm actually fine with this layering system. It's very much like Photoshop, and it's easier to explain to people as well. But for this down here, what you can do is just add different modifiers and different channels. So I can actually take different channels for whatever I'm doing and drop them in here and connect them together. So that works really well. And I've got a pretty good tutorial, and there's a lot of stuff up on the Luxology forum. I think there needs to be a lot more done with this as far as tutoring. It's pretty nice because you can add different modifiers. For instance, that claw I showed you earlier, the inverse kinematics claw. What can happen is instead of me animating two parts and setting up keyframes for two parts, I can actually set it up right in this assembly and then clone that rig and join it together. So rather than setting it up twice, I can set it up once and then just mirror it over. You got a door swinging. Your door, you could set to open. You can actually just clone that, and then with this assembly, just add a modifier and put a little math function in there, and that will then reverse that channel and let you swing both doors. So it's a great way to just set up rigs and different types of assemblies. I've only used it on a couple of projects. I haven't had much need for it otherwise, but I know this will grow as well as Moto expands.
Okay, so we'll get to the last question here from Jeff. What formats can you save the movies out as?
Oh, depending on your system, if you go to Render Animation, you pretty much can save it out as a movie file, and what will show up in here, now mine says QuickTime. If you're on a PC, it's going to have whatever codec you have on there. And I don't know if it gives me an option. Let me see here. Yeah, see, it doesn't actually give you an option. I would imagine it's an animation codec. But here's a little trick. Don't save it as a movie file if you can avoid it. The reason is sometimes those movie files crash, and sometimes your system hangs. If, let's say you're rendering something that takes 12 hours, and at the 11th hour, the system crashes, you lose power, whatever happens, the codec crashes, which is what I notice a lot, the QuickTime codec or AVI codec. You lose all that render time, because unless that movie finishes, it doesn't get saved altogether. So what I always do with everything is I save image sequences. And when I go to do this, I can choose any kind of format I want. So I choose a full 16-bit TIFF, nice high-quality render. And in fact, if you look at my work disk and you look at some of these renders in here, I've got sequences. I still save them because I can always call up the sequence later on and re-export it as something else. So then what I do is I use QuickTime 7 because that's the Pro version. I'll say open image sequence, and you can do this on the PC as well. And I'm just going to call up one of these jobs. I can choose my frame rate, and I rendered this out at 24 frames. and give it a second and it'll pop up. So then when this comes up, come on, it can crash on you. Great. Nice. Once that sequence comes up, then what I can do is export it out to AVI, to QuickTime, to animation codec, to whatever I need. And as it turns out, that really works out well, because not only did I render, export out something for a client recently, I didn't save it at the right frame rate. But because I had the original frames, I was able to load it right back up and save it out for them. So really nice way to work.
Okay, so that's all the questions we have time for. I'm just going to switch the screen back to mine.
Okay.
All right. I just want to thank Dan for that fascinating presentation. It was really well done.
It's an old picture.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
I just want to thank everyone out there who attended this presentation, Novedge's Best of the Best webinar series. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Novedge, we're the leading online design software superstore. Not only do we have the best prices around, but our staff is awesome and extremely knowledgeable. You can call or chat with them at any time. Another thing I'd like to draw your guys' attention to, that is to your benefit as well, is Rhino Jungle. Here at Novedge, we like to go above and beyond for the design community. We've created several communities that foster collaboration and communication between design professionals. I know it's called Rhino Jungle, but it's not just about Rhino. Really all-inclusive for all 3D modeling software. Moto is a big part. A lot of Moto members in there, so you can collaborate with them. It's free. It's easy to sign up. When you do sign up, you'll get the latest information on trends, news, videos, tutorials, basically all things 3D modeling. This webinar will be uploaded on there as well, so in case you missed anything or want to review again, it'll be on there for free. So again, thank you, Dan, and thank everyone who attended. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, feel free to email me. You can visit our website, novedge.com/webinar series, to view upcoming webinars. Maybe there's one that you might be interested in. And until then, we'll see you next time.